this particular webinar team, we are primarily focusing on a few things, right? First of all, we are going to discuss about the CCSP mindset, just an overview. What is a CCSP mindset? Then we basically discuss about some 10 questions, which gives you an idea regarding the CCSP examination. And while we are discussing, I'll give you a logic regarding how to approach the answer step by step. Okay. And the final if you have any questions, I can definitely answer that. Okay. Cool. So first of all, team, as you all know, this is the exam pattern. When you basically go for CCSP, there is a total of 6 domains, and the CCSP exam is basically having a change coming up for August 2026, August 1st, 2026. Okay. And there is only a few topics which are changing, except that the format and every other factor remains the same. Like in this exam, currently it's actually like a total 6 domains. For the new exam pattern also, it's total 6 domains only, and the weightage is not changing much. Okay. For regarding the examination part, team, so this exam, CCSP exam, is basically CAT-based exam, which from last one year plus, it's basically CAT-based exam, and the exam duration is 3 hours. Okay, we have a total 3 hours exam duration, and you have around 100 to 150 questions in the exam. There is no fixed number of questions. They will basically have a number of questions from 100 to 150, and out of these questions, team, okay, out of these questions, like once you get the passing score, like the passing score is 700. Once you get the passing score, your exam will automatically end. Okay, like maybe like your exam will end at 100, 110, or 105, whatever it is. At a point where you get the passing score and the system get a confidence regarding your performance, the exam will automatically end. Okay. And out of these questions, 25 questions are basically for research based. Okay, there is no score for these questions. Out of these questions, you see, you will get 25 questions for research purposes, and there is no scoring for that particular questions. Okay, all the questions of this exam is basically in a CAT-based format, and it will be completely MCQ. The whole exam will be a MCQ format, multiple choice questions format, and maybe also you will have a drag and drop as well. Like you will have two sites, two choices where you can just simply drag and drop. Okay, like that. And for writing the exam, you have to go to the Pearson VUE testing center. Okay. Like you can't write the exam online. You have to basically go to the Pearson VUE testing center. Okay. Just to give you an idea regarding the exam. In fact, we already discussed about this in our previous webinars. This is just an overview. Okay. Now, first of all, when talking about the mindset, okay, when talking about the mindset of CCSP, what exactly we have to keep in mind? Okay, let me tell you. So let's take an example here, team. I want everyone to see if you can share your thoughts on this. Think about this, team. Let's say, for example, which is the best cloud service provider? If I simply ask you a question, which is the best cloud service provider? It depends, right? Exactly, it depends. That means it may be like AWS, it may be Azure, it may be Google, it may be IBM, it may be Oracle, right? Any cloud. But the whole point is like this, team. When we talk about a organization, okay. So if I directly think that AWS is the best, or if I directly think that Azure is the best, that means I'm thinking more from that provider's perspective. So I'm not thinking about my business, I'm thinking about that provider's perspective. But if I think from a business perspective, team, as I always say this point, when you basically think in a business perspective, nothing is best. Okay, the point is like this. When we think from a business perspective, when you think from an organizational perspective, nothing is best. That means what? Only if it's best, if it's able to meet your business requirements. I repeat the point, team. The things are better only if it's basically able to directly support the business goals. Okay, that's a point we have to always keep in mind, team. This is the mindset we should have, because when you basically go for this examination, okay, think most of the questions you get from your organization perspective only. Like, don't worry about the technology, don't worry about the various cloud service providers there. This is a complete vendor neutral exam, as you know. This exam is you should think completely from a business perspective or from a organizational perspective. For this particular business, what is the best? Okay. The second thing is the team. For example, let's say when you basically talk about data security, when talking about the legal challenges, when talking about the compliance challenges, when talking about the application hosting, when talking about AI. So for all these things, what is the primary concern we have? The primary concern we are having is that what is the level of control we have? What is the level of control we have? Okay, because the moment that we basically go to a public cloud provider like Amazon or Azure or any cloud, that means that we are basically having something called as a shared responsibility model, which is talking about the responsibility shared between the cloud service provider and cloud service consumer. Okay, that's the second pointer we have to keep in mind. The third point is that, see, what is the, as we discussed, you're thinking about a business, right? So for a business perspective, what is the challenge we are trying to understand, or what is the risk we are trying to understand? Don't worry about technology. I'll give an example. So for example, if I'm telling you, in what interval, okay, this question, let's say if I'm giving an example, in what intervals we have to rotate our encryption key files or rotate our password. In your company, if I simply ask you, will we rotate the password every 1 year or will we rotate the password every 6 months? What you will answer, team? Okay. So that means that you don't have a fixed time, right? So for example, for some company, it can be 1 year. For some company, it can be 6 months, right? For some company, it can be 3 months, right? So when you see these numbers, that can be a tricky part, because when you go for the examination, they will try to make you focus on the tools, like for example, some particular tools, or they will try to make you focus on the like that numbers like this, or maybe like some specific technologies and all. So you should focus on a generic approach. You should not basically worry about technology. You should basically think about a risk based approach. In fact, the same thing for architecture also, because what we are thinking is not about configuring something on a cloud platform. The role of a the certified cloud security professional is not for something to configure on AWS cloud or Azure cloud, etc. The goal of a, yes, a cloud governance professional is to basically ensure that whatever things happening in the cloud, or whatever cloud we are selecting, whatever activities we are performing in the cloud platform, all these are aligned with your business goals. So in fact, the CCSP mindset needs a completely neutral mindset, which is only thinking about your business. Don't think specifically about a cloud service provider. You should have a complete mindset specific to your business requirements. Okay, like that. Now, when you basically, I'm going to share the questions, team. So when you basically answer these questions, I'm going to share with you. You should answer the questions. Okay. You should make sure that follow this approach. Okay. Don't try to jump into the answers. Instead of that, when you're reading the exam question, this is the approach which you have to follow. First of all, you have to read the choices. Make sure that you read the choices. That means don't try to read the question initially, because if you read the question first, you will have some thousand thoughts coming in your mind. That's a fact, team. The moment you basically try to read the question directly first, you basically have a lot of thoughts will come to your mind, because you have a lot of things you have learned in CCSP, right? So better to make sure that you read the choices first, read the answers first, then read the entire question. Okay, read the entire question. Okay, read the entire question. Now, and focus on what they are asking you. So basically, this is the context. Okay, and this is basically what they are asking you. This is the query to you. Focus only on the query. Don't try to overdo your job. Okay, because when you get a query, try to focus only on that query, not about the entire story. Okay, that's the two pointers we have to keep in mind, team. Read the choices first, then read the question, read the entire question, then focus on the uh, query that they are giving you, then try to answer it. Okay, like that. So, question is, a large enterprise is migrating its own premises HR system to a public cloud model. During an internal audit, it is discovered that the VM images used for scaling contain outdated software and hard-coded credentials. The cloud team argues that the image should be handled by the CSP. What is the most appropriate corrective action? So, team, now, uh, so for example, what is the query that they're asking you in this question? What is the query? Are they talking about who wins the argument? What is a query? The query is that. Okay, the query is that what is the most appropriate corrective action? Okay, so they are not talking about anything else. They are asking you what is the most effective corrective action as you have figured out multiple VMs having a lot of outdated things and all. So, so basically it's a IaaS thing, right? So basically it's a IaaS thing. That means the operating system is completely the responsibility of home team. Is this a responsibility of a cloud service provider or cloud service consumer? It's a cloud service customer or cloud service consumer, right? So now that is sorted. But now what is the corrective action? So this is not possible because it's not a CSP responsibility there. Second thing is that means obviously you have hosted on an IaaS cloud platform. You don't want to basically move to SaaS, right? Then then encryption does not solve this issue, right? So what they're saying is that this is the point where we have to have something called as a baselining. Okay, we have to create a baseline. That means we have to basically make sure that first we have we create take a server. Okay, we make sure that we update everything. We install our operating system, we install the patches, we do the configurations, we update the applications and all, and make a image out of this. We call it as a golden image or golden copy. Okay, we take an image out of this, and this image is what we have to deploy for further deployments. So make sure that you implement a hardened version control golden image. Team, why it's a version control golden image? Any guess? Any guess or any reason why you feel that it's a version control golden image?
In case if we need to restore to an older version when something fails, if we move to
Yes.
an
Yes, that is one reason. But the most important thing there is, see, for example, now, let's say on July 2025, assume that on July 2025, I have basically used or I created a baseline image. So this baseline image won't be the same after 6 months or after 5 months, because what happens? We have to make sure that we update that baseline image over the period of time. What happens if I don't do that? If I don't do that, that creates again the same issue, right? So make sure that we put this image as a part of the configuration management, and it should be regularly updated. That's why we should have a version to track those changes we are making like that. Okay. So the answer is implement a hardened version controlled golden images. Fine team. Let's move on to the next question. A company is designing a cloud architecture for a highly sensitive workload requiring strict isolation from other tenants. The security team insists that logical isolation is insufficient due to regulatory pressure. What is the best architectural decision? So here we say that a company is designing a cloud architecture for highly sensitive workloads that require strict isolation. Yes. So the question clearly says the answer. So team, what is the single point that they straight away say? The security team insists that logical isolation is insufficient. Okay. So if it's not possible for us to think about a logical decision or logical isolation, what we will do? We have to go for a physical service. That means what? So for example, normally what we do is that when you go to a cloud platform, you have a, let's say you have a provider's hardware here. Okay. On top of the hardware, the customer machines are act as a virtual machines, right? That means these virtual machines are basically the something which is hosted on top of a physical server, right? That means I'm sharing the same piece of hardware with different customers. But in the same cloud platform, they also allow you to basically deploy something called as a dedicated host. That means they will give you a complete machine dedicated only for you. But again, you have an issue with the resilience and all, which you have to sort out. But primarily, if you want to have if you are not willing to have a logical isolation, but insist on a physical isolation, then the only way is to go for a dedicated host or a single tenant hardware. Okay, like that. Because otherwise what happens if I basically go for a VM, means like virtual machine or an instance or anything like that, that is always a shared thing. That is basically where there is a logical separation only. I want to have a physical server completely dedicated for me. In that case, the best way is to go for a dedicated host. But tell me team, Do you know what are the two major challenges when I go for this? What are the two major challenges if I go for a dedicated hardware? Okay, one is cost, perfect. Then anything else, team? One is cost. Second is second is you have a issue with the resiliency. That means what happens, team? For example, if I basically go for this VM, if the underlying hardware crashes, we have multiple hardware cluster there. But if this particular physical server crashes, it will basically have a downtime for us, right? So we have to basically plan for a multi-server architecture there. Otherwise, what will happen if there is one server goes down, that can seriously affect. Okay, so cost and resilience is a major concern when you basically go for a dedicated hardware. Okay, like that. Perfect, team. Let's move on to the next question. A healthcare company stores the patient records in a cloud object storage. Data is encrypted at rest using provider managed keys. The compliance team now requires maximum control and auditability over the encryption keys. What is the best approach? So, team, in this question, this actually point towards a very critical key point. That means the basic thing which we have, which we all know in the data security domain, is that when talking about the encryption key, okay, there's a best practice recommended by the Cloud Security Alliance and many other organizations. Never store the key file on the same location where it's created. That means what? So basically, for example, let's say if you basically create a data on a AWS cloud platform, don't store the data or don't store the key file on the same platform. Plus, try to always have a bring your own key option. That means what? Instead of depending on the keys that the provider gives you, if possible, make sure that you bring your own key files. So the problem is that, for example, if I'm using the keys, the encryption key for the data provided by the cloud service provider, we are concerned about that key file also, right? Because it's given by the cloud service provider. There is a possibility that the cloud service provider may have access to data. But if the key file is something which I am bringing, okay, if I am basically bringing the key files there, that gives me more control and confidence, right? So that's the reason we say that when you basically go for the best approach here, if you want to have the maximum control and auditability over the key file, you should basically go for a CMK or customer managed key. You should basically go for a bring your own key file option. Okay, like that. So let's move on to the next one, team. A company shares sensitive financial reports with external auditors via cloud storage links. Later, it discovers that links were publicly accessible and indexed. What is the most effective control to prevent this? So, team, this is a very interesting question. So, normally, what happens that the biggest challenge we are having is that we have something called as a authorization creep. Okay, also called as access creep. What do you mean by this? It means that, see, a person gets more permission than he's supposed to get. So normally, let's say, for example, we have a person like an auditor or someone who needs something called as a temporary access. Okay. Let's say, for example, we have a person here who needs a temporary access. Okay. So I grant access to him, but at some point, if I forget to revoke the access, okay. So what happens? That can create a serious liability, right? This is like a misconfiguration error. So what we do is that in almost every cloud service providers, especially when you're going for things like object storage and all, they allow you to basically have something called as a pre-signed URL. That means that, let's say, for example, this is the file we are having. This is the file we are having. I can generate a dedicated URL for this file. Okay, which will be only accessible or usable for a specific time duration. That means what? If I'm saying that this is accessible only for 20 minutes, this is only accessible for 20 minutes. Like this, I can set a specific timer until this URL gets revoked. So what is the benefit there, team? So even if I forget, it's fine, because at the end of the day, the moment that the timer expires, the link cannot be reused again. Okay, that's basically what we call as a pre-signed URL. In fact, pre-signed URL is one of the most important things which we use. I will give you best example, team. Okay, let's suppose that I will show you a practical example for this. Uh, so think about this website. Okay, I'm sharing a website here. Just give me a minute. So this is just a like this is a a website we are having. I just want to search the flowers. Just some I'm just searching something here. Okay, and I get a lot of pictures here, right? So what we do is that when you basically get a picture here, okay. So what is a pointer here? You can see that in this picture, I can just pay the money and I can download this picture. So this download link will be accessible only for a very few minutes. So what is happening there? They are creating a time-bound temporary download link which is authorized. And that is basically possible with the help of this pre-signed URLs. Okay. So the answer is having a proper pre-signed URLs. The term may slightly vary according to the cloud service providers, but still the concept is basically the same thing. Okay. Like that. So a fintech company exposes API for third party partners. The API uses API keys embedded in the client applications. Recently, unauthorized transactions were detected, and investigations show keys were extracted from the mobile apps. What is the best corrective action? So, team, what is the reason there? The reason where is that when you basically go for this kind of a APIs and API keys, okay, the problem is that that is a long lived credentials. We basically call it as a long lived credentials. That means these API keys are always static. Okay, so the reason is that the API keys are always static, and it can be obviously as it's static, there's a possibility that it can be exposed. But if I basically go for a OAuth is a authorization protocol, right? If I basically go for a OAuth with a token based, or what is the benefit of a token, team? The token will always have an expiry, right? So if I basically go for a OAuth with a token based authentication, the benefit is that it helps us to make sure that every transaction will get a different ID there and it won't be repeated. So what is the benefit? Even if the attacker is able to get the previous token, they won't be able to do anything there. Is that clear? So we basically make sure that we implement a OAuth 2 with short-lived tokens. API keys are static and can be easily exposed. But if I go for OAuth with token-based things, see, technically it helps us to reduce this replay attack, or we can call it as a exposure risk is there, right? We can reduce that. Yeah, Anushree, go ahead.
So Krisha, I also, I mean, the option B seems to be the best corrective action, but A can also be an option,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Why don't we use
Okay.
A? I mean,
I got it. The point is that definitely A can be a choice, but the thing is that this is not a risk which this is something which we cannot do every day, right? So basically, I want to make sure I have a mechanism to do it at least in a particular intervals. So what happens? Even if I rotate, I may be having it do it in a month or a 3 months or 6 months, right? So better than that, if I can basically make it the least possible time, that's the best thing, right? That's why I go for the OAuth 2.0. If this was not there, we can think about A for sure. Okay, like that.
But again, Krish, right? The question says the keys are embedded in the client applications,
Yeah,
right?
we need to remove it. That's what I'm saying. Instead of
Mm.
that, we have to
Okay.
remove that particular things and make sure that so it is practically not possible for you to go to client applications and continuously modify it every time, right? That's the reason.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks.
In fact, team, when you basically go for CCSP exam, always keep in mind when you go for CCSP exam, most of the questions will be having all four choices maybe right. You have to choose the best one like that. Next one, team. The CI/CD pipeline automatically deploys code to production after passing functional test. A security incident occurs due to a vulnerable library that passed through unnoticed. What is the most effective control to prevent recurrence? So, in this question, they're saying that a CI/CD pipeline automatically deploys the code to production after passing functional test. A security incident occurs due to a vulnerable. Okay, now how do I prevent something passing through unnoticed? Always keep in mind in those pointer where if you want to prevent something from going unnoticed, always go for control gates. You should have some kind of a CI/CD control gates. And one major thing is basically we call it as control gates or hooks. That means what? So whenever in the DevSecOps pipeline, we want to make sure that we mandatorily implement SAST and DAST. What is the benefit, team? SAST is basically for a code level security review, and DAST is basically for a runtime application security review. So now, only after we complete the SAST and DAST, only after the SAST and DAST is properly done, only after that we get a assurance, or only after we get a confirmation from this particular tools, then the pipeline should go further. That's basically what we call as integrating SAST and DAST towards the pipeline. Answer is B. Okay, team, let's move on to the next question. An online service experiences performance degradation. Investigation shows that authenticated users are making excessive API requests within allowed functionality, causing resource exhaustion. No malicious payloads are detected. What is the best control to address this issue? So, team, whenever we talk about the API, okay, what is the tool which we use for filtering or basically like authorizing the API request or rate limiting and all? What is the tool which we use for rate limiting, authorization and all? We call it as a API gateway. The tool is what we call as a API gateway. And team, if you want to ensure that you want people to avoid doing this malicious, payloads and all, or sorry, you want to basically reduce the number of excessive API requests, go for API throttling and rate limiting. That means what? With that will ensure that a person can maximum spend only up to a very specific amount of request. So the answer is C, which talk about API throttling and rate limiting. It actually ensures that that particular API will basically have a specific number of requests we can basically make per minute or per second from a user like that. Okay. See, this is not attack there. So we don't have to block anything. This is not attack. It's mostly about the overutilization. Like if you basically go for the modern AI tools, we have the token based thing, right? Like the same way. Next one, team. The company uses serverless functions to process sensitive transactions. Suspicious activity suggests possible data exfiltration through one function, but no persistent compute instances exist. The function executes rapidly and terminates. What is the best method to support the investigation? So the question is, a company uses serverless function to process sensitive transactions, right? Okay. Okay, it's actually talking about serverless, right? So basically what happens that team, we can't go for A because yeah, we can do, but that is not possible, especially when you go for a cloud and all, it's not easy, right? Then you will never get access to the underlying host because in serverless, you never see what is happening in the backend also. So there is no visibility over the underlying host. So B is also out. Third thing is that re-execute the function debug mode. See, debug mode is basically different, right? Why do you basically want to do a debug mode, right? So here the pointer is that you can analyze the logs because whenever we create a function, we obviously have logging enabled and we want to make sure that we review the logs created while the instance was running and see what was the issue. Okay. Because only if you see the logs, you will be able to see what is happening, right? I just want the best method to support the investigation. So basically to ensure that going through the logs, easiest way, right? For detective controls, obviously, we can basically go for logs, right? Next one, team. Security logs for a cloud environment are stored within the same account as production systems. During an incident, attacker gains administrative access to the and delete the logs, preventing proper investigation. What is the most effective architectural improvement? So, in this question, the reason why I want to mandate this question is that there is a word we have discussed called we have in the training called as a mandatory log management best practices. Because when you basically have a lot of cloud accounts in our team, the rule is that never store the log file in the same account where it's created. So basically try to have a send the log file to a centralized location and make sure that the log files have a immutability. What is the immutability, team? That means nobody should be able to go and directly delete the log files, right? So make sure that you should have a separate account or a separate environment there where you send all the log files, and make sure that nobody can simply just go and delete the log files. Okay. So what we do, I just want to make sure nobody can simply go to the log files and delete it. Okay. Like that. Like we have a strict role based access control, we have a separation of duties, multiple things we do for that, but make sure that the logs are stored separately, which gives a proper immutability.
This was actually a little tricky for me. I was first thinking about encrypting the logs at rest, but
Okay. Ha.
then
Possible thing. But the thing is that see, encryption does not prevent deleting something, right?
deleting something. Yeah, I reread the question and then only I
Exactly.
then moved on to see.
Perfect. Because if I go for this particular, access is possible. Like by encrypting, we can basically prevent the access team. But I want to make sure they are not able to delete it also. So in that way, the best thing is to make sure have a separate immutable storage environment. But yes, team, that this kind of questions will be there in the exam. As I said, like if you miss even a single word, the answer can be, like flips. It's actually make the things more trouble like that. Okay.
So, Krish, just to check, so if the word immutable was not there, will
Okay.
there be a, change in
Still, I
the.
will say separate environment, right? Where we can put encryption and security and all like that. So, team, last question. The SaaS provider processes customer data and later use it internally to train machine learning models. A client raises concerns that this was done without explicit consent or contractual agreement. What is the primary issue? So, team, there is something called as a consent, right? When you basically go for, collecting a data or managing it for any purpose, etc., you should basically have a consent. Like transparency and consent is because, as per GDPR or as per any other privacy laws, with consent is a very important thing. So the subject should be having a clear idea on for what purpose their data is collected, what data is collected, how it's processed. Okay. And if you don't have a proper contractual term regarding the ownership and usage, that can obviously lead to a misuse of the data. Okay, like that. Fine, team. So that's what in this particular thing, team. I hope you got a clear idea. So, team, how do you find the questions? How do you find the questions?
Initially, the questions were, I mean, like
Easy.
two obvious choices,
Okay.
but towards the end, I think, yeah, it was
Yes.
a little confusing and
Okay. So, team, in the examination, what happens that don't try to think about the size of the question. The question may be small or large, but it will be like a bit tricky. And as we discussed, the choices can be the most challenging one because it will all things may be right. So that's why I'm telling you read the four choices so set your mindset for that only that four choices. Then if you read the question, you can reach the answer more easily. And read the entire question. Read the entire question and specifically focus on what they're asking you. See, now you will have a whole question, read the entire question, but focus on what they're asking you. That gives you a more specific idea. Okay, like that.